Oh,
It seems like what happens is I know these people for a long time. And I think that's because I've lived so long, you know.
Yes, you
just
have.
meet people and you like them and
Just
you
keep
keep them
doing it.
around. Are you talking out there?
yeah, just keep living longer. That's all. Just encouraging sounds.
um, uh, Julie Hawkins and I go way back. And I'm so proud of her. Have you ever known somebody for a while and you watch their growth? And you just keep going, wow, look at that. And then a little while later it's, wow, look at that. And then she writes a book.
Wow, look at that.
And then she talks all around it seems like all around the world, but I think it's around the valley, but she talks. And it's so exciting to see that emergence. It's one of those things that I have found in my life, that some people get out of their cocoon and then sit. But this lady got out of her cocoon and grew. And that is one of the greatest things you can do. Her talk today is going to be, say no without guilt. Any of you ever have a problem of saying no when you don't really want to? Have you ever? Okay. Well, you're going to find out how you can set boundaries. Because ministers get caught up in wanting to please everybody and make sure everybody's life works. And sometimes that's not the best for everyone. So what I want you to do is turn up your hearing aids, open up your ears, and listen to this lovely lady as she says how to say no without feeling guilty. Okay, please welcome Julie Hawkins. You're welcome, Dave. Okay, if you get back here, I'm going to go sit here, and you're going to have, well, you have to, figure out. See, can you see the clocks?
I can.
Till 10 after if you want that long, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'm going to move. We do a little podium dance here.
Thank you, Dottie. I'm feeling a little teary today, so I'm sure I'm not. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm always happy to be here.
There's Kleenex right there.
Yes, I brought them in my pocket, but I'm glad they're right here. I am a recovering people pleaser. When I was a kid, I have an older sister still, but when I was a kid, I would watch the dynamics of the family. And I just always felt that if I gave in, if I said yes, if I was agreeable, then maybe things would be good. They would be quiet and calm and happy. Which really wasn't the case. But nonetheless, we tell ourselves all that stuff. And as I grew and became an adult and became a young mother, I kind of felt the same way. Well, there are just times you give in to your children because it's easier to say yes than it is to feel like you have the argument about why you can't do something. And of course, this theme carried out to my corporate world, my business world career. And I just thought, if I say yes to the boss, if I agree and go along, then I'll get rewarded. I'll get the praise and I'll get the raise and I'll be acknowledged. And sometimes it happened and sometimes it didn't. And I kept saying yes when there were times when I really wanted to say no. And all I really wanted to do was avoid confrontation. I'm sure everybody can relate to this in some way. I did it in my personal relationships with my husband, with my friends, with my daughter, and I did it in business as well. And I just continued to live out that pattern of going along when there were times I really didn't want to. But I didn't know how to say no in a way that felt comfortable for me, that felt like I could convey what I wanted to convey. And sometimes I just didn't even feel like I could say no. I'm sure if you think back to your working days and in certain situations that I can't say no to the boss. I'll bet you can. In any event, I soon realized that this wasn't really working for me, but I didn't know what to do about it. And what I did know was that every time I said no, I sometimes felt guilty. And every time I said yes when I didn't want to, I felt awful anyway. It felt like a no-win situation. So what did I do? I kind of just let it go. I just kept doing what I did. And over time, I noticed certain things happening. I noticed that I would feel angry and resentful if I said yes when I didn't really want to. And what did I do with those feelings? I stuffed them away. And sometimes I even did all kinds of clearing work to get rid of them. But guess what?
It stays.
They don't really go away like that because the underlying problem was still there. And this really became a lifetime pattern of self-sabotaging behaviors. Who was I really hurting?
Yourself.
Myself, exactly. And yet I kept doing it over and over and over again. It's interesting how we, as humans, get into a groove. No matter how crappy it feels, no matter how awful the outcomes are, we still continue to do those sometimes knee-jerk, painful responses and patterns just because they are that, a knee-jerk response that we've learned. And we just don't always have the skills or the knowledge to change them. So we keep doing them. After years of doing this knee-jerk response and trying to set a boundary, I realized I had no clue as to set a boundary. Do you know, when we're young, we hear, you need to set your boundaries. Can you remember hearing that as a child? Can you remember hearing that as an adult? And yet, what does that mean? Set your boundary where? Set your boundary how? What the hell is the boundary? How do you even know what the boundary is?
What is a boundary?
What is a boundary? That's a great question. Well, a boundary is a limit. It is a limit. And we all have limits. But sometimes we don't know what they are. And you know, it's interesting. Boundaries or violations of boundaries will show up in almost every aspect of your life. I'm going to admit, I'm going to cop to it, I'm a boundary violator. And guess what? We do that because when our boundaries are stepped on, we then turn around and step on somebody else's. Here's my confession. I step over a line sometimes when it comes to talking about politics.
You better not do it here.
I'm just telling you what my confession is. I'm just telling you what I do. I won't go into the details.
Meet you outside.
Yes, and we'll talk all about it. There are places in our lives that we don't really think about that there's boundaries in those areas. But sometimes we just have those conversations or we step over those lines. We give our political views I'm very, very free with mine. And honestly, I am still working on knowing when to not step on somebody else's boundary about that. As I said, I'm a recovering people pleaser. And yet, we do it. We feel free to do it. We have people in authoritative places who set that picture and who set that place where he feels that it's acceptable to do that. Oops, did I overstep a little bit?
I'll let you know.
Ever the diplomat I am as well. And so, what else are we going to do but follow that example? Not all of us, and especially if you're a minister or you're in the healing profession or just in any service profession. In fact, when you pull back and take a look at the bigger picture, being in a service profession or a healing profession or as a minister, the soon to be ordained, Joan, students, we think we have to give more, that there aren't limits. And guess what? People who come to us, they don't even think that we have limits. In fact, they set that tone often. They think we're there for them and solely for them. But we're not. So one of the places in my life that was highly transformative for me after years of knowing that this was a problem. And it's really interesting because your life is made up of the perceived and the perceptions and metaphors for how we act out our life. And I remember driving down the street one day with my late partner Chris, who was alive at the time, obviously, and looking in the rearview mirror and seeing a car behind me. And I really felt that this car was just really too close. And as I can be sometimes, I get a little, I'll say verbally excited in the car while I'm driving. And I looked in my mirror and I said, "Get off of my ass, what are you doing? You're in my space." And Chris turned to me and she said, "Okay, I don't see that. I don't think that car is too close." And I realized in that moment that was the expression of my inability to act, to set boundaries in my life. That I was acting this out in a way that I could hear it maybe in this way as a metaphor. And we do this all the time if you listen to your own language. And it was such a light bulb moment for me. I went, wow, I guess that is really a big flippin' issue I need to work on. And so what did I do? Nothing. Because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to solve the problem of setting boundaries. I didn't know what my boundaries were, how to identify what my boundaries were. And I think this is a big problem, especially as somebody in the healing and service profession. And when you are first starting out in any of these professions, you think that you need to be there for everyone all the time, like on call 24/7, and guess what? You're not, you can't be, and oh, by the way, you should not be. And there's a really good reason for that. That is because when you do that, not only do you give too much of yourself, but you set up the example that anybody can walk into your life and take from you at any time, anywhere. And how does that serve you? Or the people in your life? It's big, it's hard. So what do? We often go back and forth between extremes, giving everything and then coming back and feeling really angry or resentful about it, or overwhelmed or stressed. I had a light bulb moment. Well, I've had many of them in my life. I mean, I sometimes feel like I have light bulb moments every day. And this is good. I invite everybody to have aha light bulb moments every day. That means you're aware and creating awareness in your life. And that's hugely important in this work that we do. When my daughter was a teenager, she was demanding in some ways.
That's the definition of teenage.
It is the definition. And my daughter seemed to just really bring out that characteristic in herself, which in turn created a whole lot of angst for me. Because I'm a people pleaser, right? I don't want confrontation. And I remember this light bulb moment, just as if it was yesterday. It's funny how time flies so fast, right? And we were standing in the kitchen, I was making dinner, and I could look out from my kitchen into the living room as I was cooking and preparing a meal. And she asked me for something. And the truth is I don't remember what she asked me for, because as a teenager I felt like she was always asking me for something, right? Can I do this? I want that, blah, blah, blah. And she asked me for something, and I said, Let me think about that. Later, those words evolved, and that's another conversation that we can have at some other point in time. And what that did for me and what it did for her and our relationship was to put a pause, a stop to that knee-jerk response that I had of either saying, no, don't bother me now, or I can't think about that now, or yeah, sure, and then going back later and thinking, oh my God, what was I thinking saying yes to that? I mean, as adults, we do that regularly, especially in the service industry, especially as ministers. What was I thinking saying yes to that? And then the cycle begins. We beat ourselves up. Well, this was truly a breakthrough moment for both of us, because it gave me the opportunity to break part of that pattern that I had been so oblivious to, and to come back with something that I wanted to really consider for her. I wanted to give her a considered response. And you know what? That made her really happy. And instead of just giving her the knee-jerk yes or no, when I gave her the considered response, even if it wasn't what she wanted, she respected that. So it was a powerful moment for all of us, or for both of us. There was only two of us in the room. And so I invite you to really take a moment now and just think about where you've said yes to somebody when you really wanted to say no, or I need some time to think about this. Because thinking about it is good. Here's why it's so good. When you give in, when you say yes, when you really want to say no, you are giving a valuable piece of who you are away in a way that doesn't serve you or the other party. And that causes pain. It causes hurt feelings, resentments. And you know what happens to them? They build. We keep a little silent sort of not intuitive, as a sort of mental inventory of, oh, you're asking me again. Oh, I did it again. Oh. And now they're building. Those resentments build. And then what do we do with them? Well, if you were like me, they probably built to a fever pitch, and then you went, poof. And I'll tell you, it's really funny. I used to be very proud that I would say, I have a really long fuse, but when I get to the end of it, watch out. And now in retrospect, I look back at that and think, what was that about? That was about my inability to set boundaries, to come from a place of loving myself enough, valuing myself enough to say, maybe, maybe not. Here's why I choose to say no to this. Here's what's going on for me. Or, guess what? You can negotiate. We kind of forget there's these polar regions in our lives, a lot. We tend to be from one extreme going to the other extreme, forgetting that there are places that bring us together in the middle, that can bring us into agreement, that can bring us into sometimes harmony. So saying no or saying yes, those aren't the end-all be-all. Sometimes they're the beginning steps. In fact, often no is just the beginning conversation. Especially for people pleasers. You know, people pleasers, we really need to have we have the need to communicate with others why we are doing something, especially if we're telling somebody no. And that's okay. That's really okay. That makes us feel validated and acknowledge that we're doing the right thing for us. You know, this time of year it's an interesting time of year. I often say that it brings out the best and it brings out the worst in people. Again, those polar opposites, right? And I just wonder if we could all just take a deep breath. You know, breathing's really important. If you're not breathing, you're not alive. And so breathing is really not just to keep you alive. It is what I call a stopgap measure, a moment of reflection. The place to be able to just take a moment and gather your energy back into you and go inside and say, what is most important to me about my decision with what you're asking me? This is what I did with my daughter. And it really set a precedent for me. And it set, she wasn't really any less demanding as time went on. She challenges me in really powerful ways, and we co-created our coming in together to do that. And I'm thankful for that, although some lessons are really tough, aren't they? So I really invite you to take time when somebody asks you to do something and think about it. How does it serve you? How does it serve them? What is most important for you in responding to them? You know, when you give, and I'm going to tell you, I really hate this word, but for lack of a better word at the moment, when you convey an authentic no, an authentic yes, an authentic response, one that comes from here, one that comes from here, and one that comes from your gut, and you do it in a loving and compassionate yet confident way, it will land. It will land with the person that you're saying it to. I'm not saying they won't like it. They might object. And then you get the chance to go back again and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Maybe we can negotiate around this. Maybe we can find some place in the middle. And sometimes there isn't some place in the middle. Sometimes no is no. And you know what? I give you permission to say no. I never had that permission. We think that it should be intuitive. It isn't. It isn't as a people pleaser. It isn't as a woman in our culture. Men, don't get mad at me for saying that. It just isn't. Our society, our culture, our genetics, our familial patterns tell us to be agreeable. So I'm here to tell you, it's okay to say no or something else. See, breathing's good, right?
Can I ask you a question? What is a non-committal response?
What's a non-committal response?
Yeah, the response to what's going on, and you say something, and their response is non-committal, one way or the other.
I'm not sure I understand. Can you give me an example?
They're not saying they agree with you, but at the same time, they're not disagreeing with you.
Okay, are you saying no?
Am I saying no?
Or who is saying no and who's...
It's that you, the person that I'm interacting with
Mhm.
is not being one way or the other, you know, agreeing or disagreeing, you're just.
Oh,
Giving a
do we have to have an answer right in that moment?
No, yeah.
Is that not
You see, it's a pattern.
Yeah.
It's a pattern. We're like, wait, I need to know one way or the other. Ooh, what if I have to have some time to think this through? What if the other person needs some time to give you a considered response? Wouldn't you value a considerate and acknowledging and caring and authentic response more than a, sure, I'll do that, and then you have to go back and figure out how you can't do that? We're so used to having it like this. Or giving it like this. No, stop, break that pattern. And here are my 7 magic words for you.
Write this down.
Whenever that happens for you, whether it's giving them or hearing somebody else, whatever situation you're in, it's that is a word, comma. I'd like to think about that. It's not let me think about that. You have permission to think about that already. You don't need to get any more permission. It is your human right. What I did when I said those words to my daughter was it allowed me to go inside and say, wait, I really do need to think about this for you. I really want to give you the considerate response that you deserve. I'd like to think about that. And you know why this is so important? Because you, my friends, are the most important person in your life. Not the person sitting next to you, not the client that comes to you, not the parishioner, not not anybody else, you. You are the only person who can make those decisions for you. You are the most important person in your life. And I invite you to start treating yourself in that way. Because when you set the appropriate limits, you're saying, I love me enough to do what's right for me. And if that benefits you, great. And if it doesn't, that's your problem. You have to deal with that. Which it is, because everything is set up that way in the universe. So remember, you have innate greatness inside of you. And when you give a piece of that away without being considered or considerate of it, it's hard to get that back. Love yourself enough. Go inside, look within. Think about what you want to do and how you want to respond to somebody. You do not have to give them that yes or no in the moment. Because what do we say? I'd like to think about that. Thank you.
Yay! Woo!
Oh, I have a book. It's on everywhere that you can find it. Amazon, Balboa, wherever you want to go. I didn't bring any with me, but you can certainly buy it online. It's called Say No Without Guilt by Julie Hawkins. And if you have any questions, come up and see me after.
Thank you. Dr. Eileen, if you could put a chair right up here, and I stand up here. Any chair will do.
Use mine, I'm gonna be off.
Chairs right facing the audience. Don't put it on the podium. No, right in the middle. Right in the middle.
Right?
And Courtney, I think you have a job to do right now.
Yeah.